Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Interviews from the Crypt. I'm Adam Holtzaffel. Joining us tonight is the writer and director of Scare Package and The Pale Door, Aaron B. Koontz. Thanks for joining us, Aaron. How's it going?
It's great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Anytime. And to get started, what kind of drew you to the horror genre and made you want to make films?
Well, first, I would like to just give a caveat to Scare Package that even though my company produced the whole thing and I was a producer of the entirety of the project, we did have other writers, directors on there as well. But I directed about half of the movie. Anyway,
Yeah.
just wanted to give that clarity. So as a kid, I was raised in like a very strict Christian household. I was not allowed to watch horror films at all. They were kind of the forbidden fruits of my childhood, which made me seek them out and want them that much more. So, but my grandmother got HBO for free, weirdly enough, and I used to take VHS tapes to her house, and I would record overnight on like the SVHS setting, so that I could see what was there. And this was a time like in the 80s, early 90s, where they didn't play R-rated movies during the day. It was only kind of at night, and it was really horror stuff too. Like anything
Right.
horror, that's when they played it. So it was just an abundance of horror movies that would come back, and I would change the tapes out every day. And that combined with like a little Monster Vision, some Joe Bob Briggs stuff, which makes sense if you've seen Scare Package, were really my kind of education and horror, if you will. And it just, I had no idea that I could feel that way watching a movie. I was like excited, I was tense, I was scared. I became obsessed with like Friday the 13th in particular. I mean, I have a Friday the 13th tattoo. Like,
Right.
I rooted for Jason, it was like a weird thing for me. I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, I want him to kill more kids. And so yeah, all of that just became a deep dive for me, and I've just been, obsessed with it ever since.
Awesome. And like you had said, Scare Package had a group of writers and directors working on it. What was that process like? Was everyone kind of localized, or was it, kind of throughout different parts of the United States and the world and sending stuff back and forth?
Yeah, it was everywhere. I mean, they were from all over the place. So we made a bunch of short films, and then had made a feature film called Camera Obscura, and we had toured with festivals through those, and we just got to know all these amazing filmmakers that we loved. And Camera Obscura was a really, really difficult film for us to make. The film was not released the way that I wanted it to be. It wasn't my cut. Some things like that had happened, and I just wanted to get back to like what we loved about movies and make something with our friends and people that we wanted to work with. So we just we had an idea. Cameron Burns, my co-writer and kind of co-created the concept with us. We had this idea of doing an anthology of horror tropes, and the original title was Tropes, even. But then I was like, well, if the title, like if everything's about tropes, like the poster is a movie trope, the segments are tropes, then the title itself should be a horror trope. So I was thinking of the Chopping Mall and the Silent Night, Deadly Night kind of things, and I was like, well, we got to do our own. And my girlfriend at the time came up with that title. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So we kind of rolled with it. But yeah, and then we kind of gave them a list of tropes we wanted them to tackle. They submitted to us ideas. We kind of curated them, picked the ones we liked the most, and then hired those directors and their creative teams, and we put them together and produced those segments. And and then put it together in this whole big piece. And then I wrote and directed with Cameron. I co-wrote and then directed the whole wraparound and then the big finale to kind of like make it all cohesive. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the wraparound and finale, Jeremy King's in that, and I noticed he's also in The Pale Door, along with Noah Sagan, who had worked on Scare Package. On
Mhm.
Scare Package, though, you had also worked with Joe Bob Briggs and Dustin Rhodes, who wrestling fans will recognize as Gold Dust and his current run. How'd you go about casting those segments and getting them involved?
Yeah, well, starting with Noah and Jeremy both are just old friends. So I met Noah through Starry Eyes, which I
Oh,
was a producer on. So I met him through that. He stayed at my house during the South by Southwest premiere, and we kind of hit it off, became pretty good friends, and ever since then we've been working together in a variety of ways and have other projects we want to do together and stuff. So I always want to kill Noah in everything I do, if possible. So he was in Camera Obscura. He's been in all the movies, and then Jeremy also. Those are actually the only two actors who have been in every movie I've done. And Jeremy was somebody that I worked with on a short film. Actually, many years ago, I produced a short film, and he came in to audition to be a bike cop. And he was so funny, and the scene just kept getting bigger and bigger. And we're like, man, this guy's hilarious. And then I was making a short film, and I wanted to do a horror comedy, and I always had horror comedy sensibilities. And we hired Jeremy for that, and just had an absolute blast. And then we kind of created this whole world where I just keep bringing Jeremy back. And he, in a weird way, he plays derivatives of his own. Like his last name is always Buckley in all the movies I do. So it's Chad Buckley, Tad Buckley, Padre Buckley. Even in The Pale Door, it's Bill Buckley. And they're all tied to like the Jeremy King cinematic universe. So that one day down the road, after I've made all these movies and I keep killing Jeremy King in every one, I can make this documentary, like a mockumentary called The Buckley Chronicles. That's all about all the deaths of Jeremy King. So that's my end goal. That's why I make movies, really. But yeah, so no, they made a lot of sense for us to get involved in. And I just knocked my headphones out. But they made a lot of sense for us to get involved in. And I just love those two folks, and have for so many years. And but yeah, and then Dustin Rhodes, I wanted. So being a Jason Voorhees fan and being like a Michael Myers fan and just like the iconic killer in a horror film, I needed someone who could evoke emotion with their eyes and through their body work, because I didn't want, I like the Lone Brain Killer that doesn't talk. I think if Jason was talking, I think it would ruin it. I mean, Freddy works because Freddy is scary and he's witty, but actually I prefer the more scary Freddy than the really funny Freddy that kind of happened later in the process. Yeah. So that was important to me. So I'm like, well, you have to be able to, evoke with your eyes and your body language. And who does that better than a wrestler? So so we thought about a wrestler, and then Dustin happens to live in Texas. I made the film in Austin, Texas. So I was like, look, this makes a lot of sense. And we had a mutual friend. I had them introduce me and offered it to Dustin. Thankfully, he came on, and he was, God, that guy is such a pro. He's so good at what he does. And I really think he can go on and become, a full-time actor, like leaving wrestling. Like he's got the chops in every way. He's just got the subtlety, and then again, even though he doesn't have a lot of any dialogue other than one word at the very end in Scare Package, if somebody gave that to him, he could run with it. He's great. And then Joe Bob Briggs the last segment was really about trying to understand the rules of horror and these scientists discovering that. So if you're going to do that, you are going to go get a horror expert. Is what I was like. Well, they would have a horror expert that they hire on to help them understand all this. And when I thought of horror experts, I'm like, who is a bigger horror expert than Joe Bob Briggs?
Right.
But this was prior to the Shudder resurgence. This was prior to all that stuff happening. So, there was no, Joe Bob broke the internet stuff happened. That was all after I had hired him. So, it was a nice timing that we had with Shudder and all that, and was there. But I was just a Joe Bob fan as a kid, and was like, this is who I want. Yeah. It was either Joe Bob or Elvira. I'll be honest. Those are the only two that I was willing to consider.
Yeah, and on the fringe, you could even go Rhonda Shear with that.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely Joe Bob or Elvira are the two if you need someone that's coaching the rules of horror.
Completely.
And like you said, Scare Package is all about tropes. It's kind of self-aware, tongue-in-cheek, where The Pale Door is more of a serious Western film. What inspired you to go that route?
Yeah, look, I never expected these two movies to be coming out around the same time because they're so kind of tonally different. But there are some thematic things. I still think The Pale Door is fun and comedic at times, and it's meant to be, and I like to play with that tone. But it also is a very personal story. It's a story about my brother. It's a story about my father. And, I can't tell that story as is, but I could tell it if you mix it in with some cowboys and witches. Then it becomes really interesting. Plus, I had written with Cameron Burns again. We had written this kind of weird Western idea that we had. And I liked the characters, but didn't like where the story was going. So I had to find a way. So I had that, and that was decent. But then we had to figure out what elements we were going to add to that to really make those characters come to life, and what kind of like formidable foe we could create. And I thought that, since they have all these anti-hero sensibilities, I thought that witches, a coven of witches, which are also a familial unit, I thought there was an interesting parallel between the family of cowboys and a gang of cowboys as a family and this coven as a family, and how they both are formed out of similar plights. Whereas, with the witches and the cowboys both come from a place of hurt, and they come from a place of pain. And this idea that pain creates more pain, hate creates more hate. And, that you can break that cycle or you can fall victim to it. And I just, so we really played in the witch's backstory, and then also the gang's backstory, to tie them both to moments of, where it's a learned behavior that they are going through, and it's a learned behavior of the way that they're dealing with their lives. So that just became cool. And then, the idea of just cowboys and witches is also pretty cool and fun. So.
And you'd frozen up there after you'd mentioned Cameron's name, so I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
We lost a little bit of what you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Cameron and I, we had written a weird Western, and we just had good characters, but we didn't have a good way to finish it. And then we had also written a weird kind of witch story that took place in the Salem times. So I'd done a lot of research, Cotton Mather and all that. And neither script really worked individually, but when we combined them, we're like, okay, now we have something. That's where the Pale Door kind of came from.
Cool. And casting for the Pale Door, in addition to Noah and Jeremy again, you have Zachary Naiden, which fans will recognize from Happy Endings and Flash Forward, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Laura Walters from Boogie Nights and The Butterfly Effect, and of course Stan Shaw from Monster Squad. How did they come to get involved in it, for being an Austin-based company and just it out there?
Yeah. I mean, look, I joked with David Guillermo's my casting director. I was like, look, I just want the the indie Avengers of horror films. You know what I mean? Like the kind of like the character actor, the horror character actor Avengers, kind of cast here. So I went after folks that I think I see in a lot of supporting roles, although Zach was the lead in Happy Endings, but in a lot of supporting roles that I think should be leading actors, and that I just have loved, for forever. So it's like, let's just put together these amazing Pat Healy and Bill Sage and, all of them, Natasha Bassett's so amazing, like all of them. Yeah. And then cast them around, and then find, the younger actor, the Jake, and like really go out and do a lot of casting to find who I thought was the right fit there. And Devin Druid just, like immediately like screamed off the page when we were watching his auditions. It was just so clear to see like what he was able to do, and we made the offer immediately there. But yeah, it was like Stan Shaw steals the scene in every movie he's in the background, and he's in such a small part in Monster Squad, but I've remembered him my entire life. Like he's so memorable in those moments, and even like Snake Eyes, De Palma's Snake Eyes, he's so good in that. So I just loved all these actors that I've written down for years. I was like, this is my gang. I want this motley crew of different people. Tina Parker too. Tina Parker in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad is always so funny in her moments, and I wanted this personable Brenda character, so I was like, that's perfect. So yeah, we went after all of these folks to try and have, like I said, a little bit of a motley crew of a gang, and then to have the Madame of the Witches be Melora Walters was kind of, I wrote it for her. She is, I'm a big Magnolia fan. It's one of my favorite films. Paul Thomas Anderson's a huge influence on me as a filmmaker. So, getting someone of that caliber was just like, I'm forever indebted to Melora, and, I wrote her a letter when we started that like will make me cry if I think about it, because of how important it was for me. It was a big reason why I got into filmmaking to begin with, was some of those movies that she was in. So that was really special. And yeah, my cast is amazing, and they're all these like wonderful, amazing people. And I feel so lucky to have gotten to get down and dirty with a weird Western with them, here last year. So.
Yeah, and it just came out on Shudder, so with that and Scare Package both kind of being exclusive to Shudder, how'd that come to be for you? Did you just kind of submit and hope they took the films or.
I mean, I always hope that the great folks at Shudder will like the films that I make because they're great people. They know what they're doing. Emily Gatto, Sam Zimmerman, Nick Lasso, Craig Engler, all those people are just wonderful. But no, I mean, I will say Scare Package, we were making that, especially when Joe Bob got picked up and it became a bigger thing. I was like, this is perfect for Shudder. But both of those movies were made 100% independently. No companies like invested in them. Like we raised the money, made them, and then we went and sold the films. And Shudder just ended up being the right home because we know our audience, and I know the kind of people that I want watching. Like Scare Package in particular. I mean, I think the Pale Door can be enjoyed in a wider, and everybody can enjoy Scare Package, I feel like, but the horror fans will enjoy it more. And that's what I know. So we really wanted to target them. And then the Pale Door being a Western, I think that can reach a wider audience. But, but I still, it gets dark and dreary and there's some weird stuff in there. And, people vomit out a black crow and stuff and give birth to a crow and weird shit, So that's a thing that's not for everyone, let's say. And but I know Shudder is down to play with that. So they were a perfect partner. And I'm going to be doing more stuff with Shudder. They're just wonderful. And, they didn't pay me to say that. So, that's true. True, they really did not pay me to say that. I wish they would, but they do not. So.
Awesome. And speaking of the vomiting of Black Crow, how'd you guys pull that scene off?
Yeah, it's crazy. Little spoiler for some folks, but seeing Stan Shaw as a character for so long, and then I remember as a kid watching Fried Green Tomatoes with my mom, and my mom was like, "That guy's a really good actor." And it was Stan Shaw. I always remembered him again, always remembering him from these smaller scenes.
Yeah.
And the idea that I made Stan Shaw vomit up a black crow is absurd to me, and the funniest thing. But yeah, I mean, look, we do everything practical, So we had a real crow wrangler that was there. There were cravens. They're actually crow raven hybrids, and but we did a mold of his face, and had to get really close up. And then we took, a taxidermy crow and we physically are pushing it through his face. And we had sequences and pieces of it. And, that's old school. It's what I grew up doing. Everything's practical effects. I mean, even the moment where they shoot Duncan and all the birds fly away, some of those are digital birds at the top, but those are footage of real birds that we're placing in. So, I mean, we're really, everything is just about trying to find, all of these practical elements everywhere that we possibly. I mean, the church, when the church goes upside down, it's not a camera trick. We are really turning. We put things on the ceiling and put everything there, and then what we did is just twist the camera so it distorts your point of view. But people think that was just a camera trick, and I'm like, no, that is. We're standing there when you walk in that church. It's so crazy because you're looking up to pews on the ceiling and everything and all that. And that's what I think is fun. That style of filmmaking is what I really enjoy and like to do. So all of it was practical. And and then we did that. Then you cut to the real bird with the sound effects. And then you see the real bird sitting there and your brain kind of connects the dots. It's all sleight of hand, kind of stuff,
right.
Magic, little mini magic tricks. So.
Yeah, and speaking of the church, how was location scouting for the two films? You have the video store and Scare Package and the church and the Pale Door. Were those you knew what you wanted, no problem getting them, or did it kind of take some time to find the locations?
For one, yes. For the other, absolutely not. So the VHS store, the rental store, is Vulcan Video in Austin. Unfortunately, they've closed now due to the pandemic, which is just heartbreaking. But I wrote it knowing that I would use Vulcan. I mean, it's a place I'd frequented many times, so I kind of wrote it for them. I knew the lay of the land and what was going to work there, and Jacob Knight, who was the manager at the time, was helped us out, and he's also a great film critic on his own regard. And so he helped us out, and we got to film out there, which was a blast. And so that was very specific, and that was easy. But the Pale Door, we shot that in Oklahoma, and what's weird about that is, probably unsurprisingly to no one, is no one in Oklahoma is cool with you taking a church. First off, doing the things that you're doing in that church that I did, and then turning it upside down. That does not happen. They weren't cool with that. So we had to build that church. So we built that church from scratch. We had this little ghost town that we had, and we built it there in the property. So, but that was the only way because nobody was going to allow us to do it otherwise. So yeah.
Yeah, and to circle back to Scare Package, it kind of ushered in a new era of anthology films. Like, shortly after that, we saw the Mortuary Collection come out, and even kind of a cousin to anthology film, Scare Me, it came out shortly after as well.
Hmm.
Um, do you kind of see anthology films as being a forgotten subgenre where every few years there's kind of an explosion of them, then it kind of fades back into obscurity again? Or
I don't know if it's ever going to go back into obscurity. I mean, I think a lot of credit has to go to, I think the real resurgence happened with like Brad Miska, Roxanne Benjamin, Simon Barrett, Adam Wingard, and those folks who really ushered in, Zach Seaman, that ushered in the, VHS. Because when
right,
VHS hit, that changed the game. Like there was a viable market again for this.
right,
It made a lot of sense. Everybody was interested. Because we had Trick or Treat before that with Mike Doherty, which was amazing, but there was still a lull after that. But then once VHS hit in
yeah,
2012, which was a hugely influential film to me because I went to film school with Adam and I know a lot of those folks, and I was like, this is something special that I think can be really, really great. And then you had ABCs of Death, and then you had Southbound, and all these
right,
others that have come, Nightmare Cinema, and all these other variations since then. And so I think it's kind of here to stay. I think there's other ways. I mean, I didn't want to make Scare Package at first because I felt like there were too many great anthologies that had already been made, or they had a much bigger budget than we did. So how could we really do something that was unique that could still stand out? Because if it doesn't stand out, then I don't want to do it.
right,
But when I kind of caught on to the idea of making them all horror comedy and all about these tropes, and then really kind of curating it around a wraparound story that's like a bigger part of the movie than just an afterthought. And I was like, this is interesting to me. This becomes a new variation. And then I got excited and I wanted to do it. But Scare Me is fantastic. And then Mortuary Collection, I think is just absolutely wonderful. I think Ryan Spindell is just a talent to watch. He's been a friend for a while. And oddly enough, small side story, the opening segment in Mortuary Collection where the woman's with the door and the tentacle things coming out of the
yeah,
medicine cabinet.
yeah,
Ryan, at one point, was going to be a director on the first Scare Package. But then Mortuary Collection was taking too long, and he had to focus on that. And I was like, cool, do your feature, dude. I'll get somebody else. And then I think we hired Anthony Cousins instead, who did the Night He Came Back Again part 4, the guy, that part, which came out wonderful. So it worked out for all parties. But what Ryan pitched me for Scare Package was that opening segment with the woman with the door and the tentacle. And I was like, oh, I love this segment. It's like such a great short. I was like, I don't know, it's not quite, I don't know what the trope is. And I was trying to figure out like how it fit into the kind of thing we were doing. And he's like, oh, I think I'll use it, I'll do it separate. I was like, okay, cool. And then it went away and I didn't think anything of it. And then he showed me an early cut of Mortuary. Or no, actually I saw that Fantastic Festival when I saw that cut. And I was like, oh my God, that's the segment you pitched me, So it's all kind of like a small family. So I'm so glad that, Ryan got that film out. I think it's amazing, and everybody should go watch Mortuary Collection. It's so good.
awesome. And have there been any projects you've been kind of working on during the pandemic as either a producer or just original stuff you're working on?
Yeah, actually, all the above. So, I mean, first and foremost, Cameron and I have been writing a ton. We've fully finished now 2 screenplays during this time. So we've got those done and ready to go. One's kind of like a slasher, serial killer, David Fincher-esque kind of story, very, very serious.
Nice.
And then another is it's a sports horror comedy. It's kind of a Mighty Ducks meets Evil Dead meets Glow. It's completely absurd and
Sounds up my alley.
yeah. I mean, we had so much fun making Scare Package. We wanted to do something else that was in that vein, so that's where that kind of comes from. And then we also are writing a holiday slasher as well that we're working on. And then we had a sci-fi body horror film that we had already written as well. So we were kind of refining those for a while. And then once we figured out kind of in the summer of the pandemic that, okay, this is not going away, right? We're going to be here for a while. How do we still continue to make movies? So as a producer, I started looking for scripts that were contained small projects that still had big ideas that we could still do during a pandemic and find a way to shoot during COVID. So actually we just produced a film that I don't think it's been announced yet, but it's actually a shark film, a shark-based movie.
Okay.
It's about a couple that gets lost at sea and there's a shark attack, but it's serious. Like it's kind of like The Revenant, but with a shark. It's really, really good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Lavan Kiet is the director, and it's really exciting. He did a movie called Fury as a Vietnamese director. Did a movie called Fury. It's awesome. And so we produced that for him in Orlando. Just got done with that about a month ago, right around Thanksgiving. Nice. And then now we're heading to New York, and we're producing another movie called Old Man with Stephen Lang that Lucky McKee is directing. So we're doing that as well. And then I leave after this, and then I go to Toronto and have another movie that we're producing. So that are all going. So it's crazy that this year, once after those first couple months, when I was done, kind of through writing and figuring out what was happening.
Right.
It's actually been the busiest second half of the year, like ever, with Scare Package coming out in June. You have Pale Door coming out in August, and now here on Shudder, in December, and then you have these movies that we were producing. It's been one hell of a year for us. It's been crazy.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I'd seen you had also produced The Stylist that Jill Six was working on. And...
I wouldn't call myself a producer. I mean, I helped out on that movie. I think I was like a production consultant or something. But yeah, I came up there. That was right before the pandemic, and I came up to Kansas City for a couple of days and had been helping out. But Rob and Sarah, the producer Sarah Sharp, and they were the producers on that. They're amazing, and they did a great job. And her movies. The Stylist is wonderful, and I think there's good news coming on that pretty soon in January. So, I helped out there. I try to help out all my friends that I can. Like I also have there's a movie called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Bigfoot. Number one will blow your mind, which is a mockumentary Bigfoot hunter movie. It's told in a Vice story that Zach Lampaw directed, and it's hilarious. And I kind of helped usher that one through. It's coming out next year. And another one called Duncan that's like making fun of Pizzagate. So there's a couple movies that I've just been helping out on, but as full-scale producers, on set, like ushering the whole thing through, that's been the one we just did in Orlando, and then New York and Toronto. Yeah.
Cool. I look forward to seeing those. I'm sure other people do too. And where can folks find you at to keep up on your projects, website, social media, anything of that nature?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm pretty active on social media because I like to promote the stuff that I'm doing. I like to talk about movies all the time, so that's where I do it. But I'm on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook as Aaron B. Koontz, just my full name, easy to find. And then my company's Paper Street Pictures, and then I have another company that's a consulting firm for horror and genre called Blood Oath as well that we just launched here in this winter too. So I'm easy to find.
Awesome. I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us. And if you have not seen it yet, The Pale Door just dropped Thursday on Shudder. Be sure to check it out, as well as Scare Package. And remember, kids, if you feel a chill, it's not the cold. You're in the crypt.